Today, we're going to break down a really fascinating white paper. It tackles one of the toughest questions you could possibly ask. After a revolution, how do you actually build a new legal system from scratch without letting the entire country just fall into chaos? It's a huge challenge, so let's get into the framework it proposes.
Really think about that question. What happens the day after? The old regime is gone. A new transitional government is in charge. And they have to answer that, right away. They have this massive job of just governing, and everything starts with the law. Which laws still count? Which ones are out? The answers to these questions are going to affect millions and millions of people's lives instantly.
And right away, you hit this fundamental conflict. On one hand, you have the people, full of revolutionary energy. They want a total radical break from the past. They want those old repressive laws gone, and they want them gone now. But on the other hand, you can't just hit a delete button on the entire legal code. That would create a total vacuum, a black hole where laws used to be, and that could threaten the stability of the whole nation. It's an incredible tightrope walk between progress and just paralysis.
Okay, so this white paper we're looking at, it lays out 3 different paths a new government could take. But before we even get into what those options are, we need a way to judge them, right? How do we know what a good framework even looks like in a situation this intense?
The paper suggests this simple but pretty powerful 3-part test. First, is it practical? Can a brand new government that's juggling a million things actually pull it off? Second, is it stabilizing? Does it keep the lights on and the economy from collapsing? And third, and this one is so important, is it promising? Does it actually give people real, genuine hope that things are changing for the better? Because without that hope, you lose the people's trust almost immediately.
All right, with our scorecard ready, let's look at the contenders. Option 1 is the restoring option. Basically, turn back the clock and bring back all the laws from before the 1979 revolution. Option 2 is the retaining option. Just keep the current laws for now and let a future government figure it all out later. And then there's a third option, a hybrid option, that tries to find a path right down the middle.
So let's dig into that first one, the restoring option. The idea here is to make a clean break, wipe the slate clean of all the laws from the Islamic Republic, and just dust off the legal code from 50 years ago. It sounds simple, like a fresh start. But the paper argues this would be an absolute disaster.
Yeah, once you start to poke at this idea, it just completely falls apart. Think about it, the world is so different now. What about laws for the internet, for cryptocurrency, for gene editing? The old laws just have nothing to say about it. And you'd have an entire generation of judges and lawyers trying to enforce a legal code they've never even seen before. So the paper says it fails the practical test, and it definitely fails the stabilizing test. It's a non-starter.
All right, so what if we do the exact opposite, the retaining option? The plan here is to just keep every current law on the books during the transition, which could be a few years, and then let a new elected parliament handle the big changes down the road. This approach is for sure practical, and it's stable. But the paper points out a fatal flaw. The problem here isn't practical, it's about how people feel. The very people who just fought a revolution for change would wake up the next day and find that all the same discriminatory and restrictive laws are still in charge of their lives. The paper argues this would create this huge wave of public frustration. It would make people feel like nothing really changed. So, yeah, it's practical and stable, but it completely bombs the promising test.
And that leads us to the paper's big recommendation, the hybrid option. This is the one it presents as the only approach that can actually thread that needle, that can deliver that immediate, visible change people are desperate for, while also keeping the country stable day to day. So here's how it works. By default, you keep the existing legal code. That prevents total chaos. But, and this is the key, on day 1, you issue a formal decree that immediately gets rid of a specific list of the most symbolic, most problematic laws. It's like using a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer.
And this is why the paper is all in on this option. Let's go back to our scorecard. It's practical, you don't have to write thousands of new laws overnight. It's stabilizing, because most laws are still there so daily life can continue. And most importantly, it is promising. Getting rid of those awful laws right away gives people real, tangible proof that a new day has dawned. It's the only one that gets a high score on all 3.
So if this hybrid option is so great, where did the idea for it even come from?
Well, the answer is probably the last thing you'd expect.
The authors of the paper looked around at other big historical moments. The fall of the Soviet Union, the Arab Spring in Egypt and Tunisia. But none of them were quite the right model. And the reason is, those transitions weren't about transforming the very ideology of the legal system in the same way. For that, they needed to find a totally different kind of example.
And here it is, Brexit. I know, it sounds pretty weird at first, but the paper makes a really interesting case. Brexit wasn't a revolution, of course, but it was a massive, ideologically driven legal shift. Britain had to figure out how to untangle itself from decades of EU law, and the way they did it offered a surprisingly useful roadmap.
The parallels here are actually kind of striking. To keep things from falling apart, the UK passed a law that, on exit day, basically copy-pasted all of EU law into their own domestic law. But at the very same time, it repealed the big, symbolic laws of EU membership, like the 1972 European Communities Act. See what they did? They got stability while signaling a huge political break. And that is the exact same logic that the hybrid option proposes for a new Iran.
So the paper lays out a clear three-part plan for a formal decree. Part 1, you officially dissolve the Constitution of the Islamic Republic. That's the huge symbolic break. Part 2, you declare that all other existing laws are still in effect. That gives you stability. And Part 3, you list out the specific laws that are being repealed effective immediately.
Okay, but that brings us to the million-dollar question. How do you decide which laws go on that repeal list in Part 3? This is where the paper gets really creative, proposing a way to turn a powerful emotional slogan into a real-world legal tool. This 6-word slogan has been the rallying cry for modern protests in Iran. The proposal is to take these 6 values and make them the official test. Any existing law that clearly and directly violates one of these 6 core values, well, that law becomes a prime candidate to be repealed right away.
And this is how an abstract idea becomes a concrete plan. You take the value woman and you use it to repeal laws about mandatory dress codes or rules that stop women from getting a passport without a man's permission. You take life and you target laws imposing the death penalty or corporal punishment. You take freedom and you go after internet censorship. It gives you a clear, powerful, and publicly understandable reason for every single change you make.
So as we start to pull all this together, you can really see the argument the white paper is making. It's all about finding that pragmatic path, one that honors the ideals of a revolution without blowing up the stability a country needs to actually survive a transition.
And this is the real takeaway. The hybrid model, it isn't meant to be the final answer. It's a bridge. It's designed to get the country through the immediate crisis, giving people both stability and hope, and then it hands the massive, long-term job of building a truly modern legal system to a future, democratically elected parliament that has the time, the resources, and the legitimacy to do it right.
And that really brings us to a final, bigger thought. This paper is focused on Iran, but the problem it's trying to solve is universal. For any country, any society going through a massive change, this is the ultimate challenge. How do you balance that fire, that passion for revolutionary change, with the boring but essential realities of everyday life? It's one of the hardest and most important tests there is.